In the history of exploration, you get stories of incredible triumphs and stories of just heartbreaking tragedy. But there are very few mysteries that have gripped us, that have really stuck in our imagination, quite like this one. It's a story about ambition, about the absolute pinnacle of technology for its time, and about 129 men who sailed off into a silent, white world and just never, ever came home. We're talking about the Lost Franklin expedition. Okay, so picture this. It's 1845. The British Empire is on top of the world. And these two ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, they weren't just any old ships. Oh no, they were basically the space shuttles of their day. We're talking iron-plated hulls made to smash through ice, internal steam heating to keep the crew warm, even repurposed train engines to give them power when there was no wind. They were this floating symbol of Victorian confidence, sent to conquer what they saw as the last frontier on Earth. And on board these two technological marvels were 129 men. You had officers, sailors, scientists, Marines. They were fathers, husbands, sons. Every single one of them was handpicked for what was supposed to be this glorious, history-making voyage that would put their names in the books forever. But within just a few years, all 129 of them were gone. The ships had disappeared. The men, it seemed, were just swallowed by the ice. And for more than 150 years, the world was left staring at this one haunting question. What in the world happened to the Franklin expedition? So, to really get a handle on the disaster, we first have to understand the dream. Because this wasn't just another trip. This was the peak, the grand finale of a national obsession that had been going on for centuries. For 300 years, this was the big one. The Northwest Passage. Everybody dreamed of it. It was this fabled shortcut across the top of the world that would open up a direct trade route to all the riches of Asia. Finding it, well, that was the ultimate prize. It meant glory, it meant money, it meant national pride. I mean, on a map, it looks so simple, right? But the reality was a deadly, shifting labyrinth of ice-choked channels. And this, right here, this really shows you the mismatch. On one side, you have the absolute best technology of the era, but that tech had some serious hidden flaws. That 3-year supply of canned food, it was revolutionary, but the solder they used to seal the cans, it was cheap, and it was loaded with lead. And on the other side, an opponent that does not care one bit about your technology. We're talking multi-year ice as hard as concrete, temperatures that could freeze a man solid in minutes. This was a classic battle of human ego versus nature in its most raw, unforgiving form. So who's leading this charge? Captain Sir John Franklin. Now at 59, he was a celebrated Arctic veteran, but a previous overland expedition of his had gone so badly that he'd earned this grim nickname, the man who ate his boots. Yeah. Still, he was determined, and his hand-picked officers, like Captain Fitzjames, had this incredible, unwavering faith in his leadership. So in late July of 1845, the crews of a couple of whaling ships watched the Erebus and Terror sail west into Baffin Bay and then just disappear into the mist and ice. That was it. That was the last time any European would see them alive. And then for 2 years, nothing. Just this profound, unsettling silence from the top of the world. Well, that silence eventually turned into alarm and then into a full-blown obsession. It launched one of the biggest search and rescue operations in history, and a lot of it was funded and really pushed forward by Franklin's own wife, Lady Jane, who just refused to give up. And what those search parties started to find, well, it painted a picture of unimaginable suffering. It took years, but through scattered graves, stories from the local Inuit, and one incredibly important document, this grim timeline started to come together. The very first winter claimed 3 men, their bodies perfectly preserved in the permafrost. By the fall of 46, the ships were caught, locked tight in a conveyor belt of ice they just could not break free from. Less than a year after that, Franklin himself was dead. And then, in April 1848, the survivors made a decision that sealed their fate. They decided to abandon their ships. This is the only written message ever found from the expedition after they got trapped. It just perfectly captures their desperation. It was tucked into a stone cairn, and it's this terse, chilling record of what happened. It confirms Franklin's death and notes that 24 men in total were gone, but it's that final line, scribbled in the margin by the new commander, Francis Crozier, that is just so haunting. And start on tomorrow for Backsfish River. And this gets us to the absolute core mystery of the Franklin disaster. I mean, think about it. Their ships were their life support systems. They were their only shelter in this world of ice. So why would 105 survivors leave them behind to march across hundreds of miles of barren, frozen land? It looks like a suicide mission. The answer, it turns out, wasn't one single thing. It was this horrifying cascade of failures, a perfect storm of a brutal environment, technology that betrayed them, and the agonizing weight of command. Here's what you have to understand. They weren't just trapped by ice, they were being poisoned from the inside out. Modern forensic analysis of the remains found shows these shocking levels of lead. It almost certainly came from the solder on those food tins, which just leached into their supplies day after day. This would have caused paranoia, weakness, even madness. Now you add scurvy on top of that, and you've got a crew that is physically and mentally just disintegrating. So for Captain Crozier, the tough, experienced Irishman now in charge, staying on the ships meant a slow, certain death. The march, it was a crazy gamble, but it was the only one they had left. The march was pure hell on earth. You have these men, weakened by disease, hauling lifeboats that weighed thousands of pounds over jagged, broken ice. And inside those boats, search parties found the most heartbreaking clues. It wasn't just survival supplies. It was silver forks, button polish, silk handkerchiefs. These were the last little pieces of a civilization they were desperately trying to cling to. Local Inuit hunters later told stories of seeing thin, stumbling men who would just fall down as they walked. And then, the most grim evidence of all, cut marks on human bones, confirmed their final, desperate resort, cannibalism. Now, when these accounts first made their way back to Britain, the Admiralty was horrified. They publicly dismissed the Inuit testimony, calling them savages, saying they were lying. The very idea that heroes of the Royal Navy would resort to the last taboo, well, it just shattered their whole Victorian image of being invincible. It was a kind of cultural arrogance, really, that stopped them from seeing the horrifying truth for decades. So for more than 160 years, the final resting place of the Erebus and the Terror was the last big piece of the puzzle. The story was literally frozen in time. That is, until very, very recently. Then, in 2014, and again in 2016, modern technology, guided by generations of Inuit oral history that had been passed down, finally began to finish the story. Research teams found the wrecks of both ships, solving the 170-year-old mystery of where they ended up. And what they found is just astonishing. The ships are sitting upright on the seabed, perfectly preserved by the frigid water. There are plates still stacked in the cupboards, scientific instruments just lying there, ready to be used. The very same Arctic environment that killed the crew had created this pristine underwater tomb, a perfect time capsule of their lost world. And here is the ultimate irony of the entire Franklin expedition. As you can see here, the massive search effort that it launched, dozens and dozens of ships over decades, ended up mapping thousands of miles of the Canadian Arctic. The hunt for the lost men accidentally completed the very mission they set out to do in the first place. It finally charted the Northwest Passage. The story of the Franklin expedition is a profound tragedy for sure, but it's also this humbling testament to that human drive to explore and to the unbelievable, unforgiving power of nature. And it leaves us with a really tough question to chew on. The search for these 129 lost men gave us the map of the modern Arctic. But when you look back at the cost, at the human suffering, you just have to ask yourself, was it worth the price?